Hello, my name is Alicia Ford. My role is National Disability Coordination Officer, and I am collaborating with ADCET on this event. I want to welcome you to this session, Enacting UDL at University, Enabling Equitable and Inclusively Engaged Learning, and our presenters, Associate Professor Stuart Woodcock and Elizabeth Hitches. Please note that information about captioning and etiquette for this session to run smoothly are in the chat and on the ADCET UDL Symposium page. This session is being recorded. Please turn off your camera and mic for the session. Please use the Q&A function to pose questions to the speaker. And don't forget to tag us on your socials with hashtag UDL Symposium 2023. This session is being live captioned. To enable captioning, click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We also have captions available via browser, which will now be added to the chat box. Over to you, Stuart and Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everybody who's joining us live and to anyone who's watching the recording. This is Enacting UDL at University, Enabling Equitable and Inclusively Engaged Learning. I'm Elizabeth Hitches. My pronouns are she, her, and on this spring day in New South Wales, Australia, I'm wearing a green shirt and have shoulder-length brown hair. I teach in inclusive education at Griffith University, and I'm very honoured to be joined by my colleague and convener on that unit, Associate Professor Stuart Woodcock.
Hi everybody, my name's Stuart Woodcock. I'm an Associate Professor at Griffith University, and my pronouns he, his, and I won't explain my look as well as Elizabeth, as it's got grey hair with a short and a black shirt. But I, as Elizabeth mentioned, I convene a course Inclusive Ed at Griffith University for the last few years, which Elizabeth has been co-designing and teaching with me over the few years.
Thank you so much. So as Alicia mentioned, this session is being recorded, and if you don't wish to appear on camera, please feel free to turn your camera off, particularly during that Q&A session, and know that this session is being captioned. In terms of etiquette, feel free to use that chat for discussion throughout this presentation. I think it's really excellent when we can engage in those multiple means and those different ways. And know that at the end of this session, we are going to have that Q&A time available. So please, throughout the session, feel free to put your questions into the Q&A function. And when we get to discussion time, you can also raise your hand using that emoji feature. As far as is possible, ensure your surrounding environment is quiet. I'm fingers crossing that mine will be too. And turn your mic off when not speaking. Now, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we join from today and recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. We pay our respects to their elders, ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. And we acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples participating in this event. And Stuart and I would also like to acknowledge where we're joining from today, which is the lands of the Darug, Turrbal and Jagera people. Now, for this particular section, we're going to begin by contextualising the approach that we're taking and thinking through why would a proactive approach be needed over more reactionary measures. We'll then be looking at how UDL has been implemented within a higher education course to provide options and to reduce barriers, and then listen to students' voices on what the benefits of these particular options are. We'll then talk through our reflection and how we're going through these cycles to increase the inclusivity of these particular courses and think where to next based on what we've learnt from this latest cycle. We'll then share our biggest takeaways from this session, which hopefully you'll find interesting too. So to begin with, we know that the higher education space, particularly in university settings, is becoming increasingly diverse. And that's something to really value and celebrate. We have students who have a diverse range of personal circumstances joining our institutions, and students who have a variety of different ways of learning. So different ways of receiving, processing, and expressing information. And what this means is that we need to be thinking about how we cater to this broad range of diversity so that every single student who enters into our institutions can achieve their full potential. Now, why would we want to do this in a proactive way? Well, we know that there are limits to reactive approaches. So one of those limitations is that we're not going to know what all of our students are experiencing, whether that's personal circumstances or whether that's accessibility barriers that they're encountering. And so we can't just rely on reactionary measures. We also know that there are limits to the formal support that's available. So not all of the learning needs and circumstances are going to be eligible for some of those formal supports that we have. So people may be caring for children, they may be working around their financial circumstances and their work commitments. They might even be experiencing certain symptoms and have an undiagnosed medical health condition, and this won't be eligible for ongoing support. So we need to find ways to ensure that all students have that equitable access to learning and that they can thrive in this environment. So the solution is that we want to be reducing those potential barriers before students are encountering them. So we want to be sure that we have those multiple ways or multiple means of students being able to perceive, participate, and engage in that learning. We also want to be sure that this is a fair and equitable process and a fair and equitable approach. So that universal approach with options available to all is the way to go.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So the course that we teach is Inclusive Ed that cuts across 3 different campuses. And what we've been wanting to do over the years is develop a more universal approach to the course. And so what we've been offering are sort of the more traditional weekly face-to-face classes, the weekly online classes, intensive days where students will do kind of one module, which will lead towards the first assessment in a whole day at the beginning, and then one towards the end of the semester as well across the various campuses, and as well as recording the online tutorials. And so that's where we've sort of been up to this point, and looking at it from options for them in regard to their learning for perception, action, expression, engagement, as well as their personal circumstances. So it can be to do with their background, whether it's financial, care responsibilities or so kind of looking at the two to cater for the options for them to bring the best out of them to reach their potential. And so what we wanted to do, looking from that, is look at hear the students' voices. And I know in some previous presentations, like Jackie Tinkler's just now, was very much taking into account student voices. We make the call on how we cover courses, teach, and those things, but hearing from the students as to the reasons why they've chosen specific classes. And so what we took the students' voices who chose the on-campus intensives, so the 2 full days at the beginning and end of the trimester, and we looked, well, for them, the reason they chose it was very much benefits for learning. So kind of for a lot of them, it was the uninterrupted content topics that were clearly linked. So rather than have one session each week, for a lot of them, they had it all in one day, where one session led into the next that led into the next. So for a lot of them, it was a deeper learning, focusing just on the one subject, no other distractions, no other kind of learning in other courses that were kind of interrupting that. The social as well, a lot of them felt that they were very much getting to know their peers in the same class because they were with them all day, and so there was a lot of opportunity for engagement and mixing the groups and interactions and those kind of things. And for a lot of them, they were saying it's easier to commit to one day at the beginning and one day at the end, as opposed to weekly kind of attendance to universities. The benefits for the personal circumstances, for a lot of them, it was financial, because they had they could work during the week as normal. They only also had to come to university once or twice through the semester instead of 7 or 8 times. Also time as well, so less time traveling and those kind of things, as well as the social, having that face-to-face engaging interaction all day with the same group of peers. So as well in hearing the voices for the intensives, we also looked at those who chose the online weekly classes. And so again, looking at the benefits for learning for them, the pace was, they decided, because it was, they were more able to go at their own pace. They were in their comfortable environment, whether that was at home or those kind of things. They were also, it was more accessible to gain access to the classes. And again, online can be convenient for them, and leads into the personal circumstances. So again, the access for them. For a lot of them that may have busy lives and those kind of things, it can be when they finish straight after work, they can just get onto the computer. If they take their children to after school clubs or those kind of things while they're playing, they can be in the car and engaging in the online tutorial, as well as it can be in their home environment, so it's kind of more comfortable for them. And then with flexibility, so that whole work from anywhere kind of thing. And again, the financial and the time is something that benefits them on the personal circumstances. One interesting, and we're still collecting some, voices from the students who still choose the more traditional face-to-face weekly classes as well. But one of the really interesting kind of takeaways that we've got from this is looking at those. There are a number of students who only access the recorded online tutorials, so they don't actually attend any of the face-to-face, the intensives, the onlines. They just purely base all their learning on the online ones. And while the assumption can often be it's accessibility, so they can access it middle of the night if they want, or any time that works around them, but it also one of the key things that we found is the benefits for learning. So for a lot of those who only listen to the recorded learning, they do it at their own pace, because they find that often the live classes go too fast for them to be able to process the information. And so for those watching the recordings only, they can pause, they can engage with it in their own way, and then press play again, and it can go at a pace that is much more convenient for them, with the actual benefits for their learning. And they find the depth of understanding, so revision to build understanding as well, because they can watch it numerous times. So they're not just relying on it as a revision tool, but they're actually relying on it as their primary source of learning from that. So the benefits for learning for the recorded classes. And so we're going to talk now into sort of where we've come from and where we're going to go as well. And I believe Elizabeth, that's
okay. So looking at students' voices around the improvements, we not only ask them about the benefits of those particular modes, but we ask them, what modes would you like to see offered? What would you like to see available? And we had a number of suggestions. So one of those was to have an intensive online class. So currently the intensive class runs face-to-face, but students suggested an intensive online class might be useful. They suggested a weekday class. They suggested that online classes be held, or there be an option that there's one held after 5 p.m. And an example of that was students who were currently working in school environments and would be reaching that 4 p.m. class a little bit late, and they'd like to see that class shifted backwards. They also suggested things like perhaps building those classes into professional development in their environments, and even taking that intensive option that's available here across other courses across the university. So when we have a look at what we've got available in 2023, based on students' voices, we know that having those 4 various options is providing students a number of benefits in the way that they can engage and the way that it can fit around their personal circumstances and their learning needs. Looking forward to our next cycle next year, we're also going to take into account what students have suggested and offer that intensive online mode as well, and have a look at converting one of those daytime classes into an evening class option that students can join online. Student suggestions have also prompted us to consider the current lecture style, which is delivered in a purely recorded fashion, and think about how we can actually build multiple means of engagement and multiple means of accessing that lecture in as well. So having it online, building in UDL, and also having the recording available. So some of our key takeaways from this has been the importance of providing options. So what students have told us is that, some students have been joining from their hospital bed and have wanted to continue with their education, needed a bit of distraction in their learning, and have been able to join online classes with their camera off and engage via the chat. We've had other students who have had a very unexpected vet trip and been able to still access learning and manage what's happening in their personal life at the same time. Having those options provided right from the start means that we haven't had to go and retrofit options or try and find ways to get students access to the learning. Students have been able to opt into those different means as and when they need it and according to their particular needs. So it really shows the importance of those multiple ways and that we can cater not just to personal circumstances, but to learning needs as well, and provide students that sense of agency in being able to select that mode that's working best for them. What this has also shown is the importance of student voice. So suggestions like that evening class or creating that intensive online option have all come about from listening to students' voices and listening to what's working for them. We also might think that some particular methods or modes have particular benefits from what we're observing, but to be able to hear that from students' voices means that we're going to be sure that those multiple means continue into the future so that all students can access learning in the way that suits them best. Stuart.
And just to finish up on, I think, furthering on from the importance of the student voice, there have been some really important bits of information that have come about from hearing their voices. And I think one of the big things that we as a university need to consider is not just using, say, the recorded online tutorials as more of a backup kind of thing. So still kind of enforcing that compulsory attendance or 80% attendance to classes. And if they don't, then they're not attending and they're not engaging. Whereas for many who have informed us and told us they have been engaging through the recorded classes. So one of the things when we look at changing for next year is how can we make those recorded sessions actually record all the time, not put them into breakout rooms where it stops, but actually keep it going and actually turn it into an engaging online class that students who rely on that recording for not just personal circumstances but learning needs, we can really make it far more interactive and engaging for them as well. And that's something between now and next year when we do the course that we'll actually consider actually focusing on those students when we do the recorded live on class tutorial.
Okay, so if you'd like to follow up on any of the references that you've seen in this presentation, there is a slide of those available. And please know that even beyond this presentation today, you can reach out to Stuart and I at any time. Our information will be on the slides, but we'll hopefully be able to drop that into the chat for you as well.
Thank you, Stuart and Elizabeth. We have about 6 or 7 minutes for questions, and we have quite a few questions coming through. So we will do our best to get through those. If we run out of time, are you both happy for us to send you a copy of the outstanding questions and get some responses back from you post-symposium?
Absolutely.
Lovely. Okay, so the first question that we have here is, this is from James, do students who use the recorded classes have the ability to ask questions asynchronously?
We haven't necessarily, because it hasn't necessarily been considered about the recording used as their primary source of learning. It's seen more as a backup, and so we do allow students to send emails for responses, but we're looking between now and next year of actually making that a much more engaging kind of reliance, so it can be used as a primary source for learning. So again, a lot of what we've been presenting is kind of where we're up to, but also where we're heading to as well, and that recorded session is very much something we want to engage in a lot more with students, so that they feel that by doing that they're not disadvantaged, but there's no stigma to them not actually engaging in the course and the tutorials and those kind of things. So that is something we're working on this year, but particularly next year when we redesign it to take that accordance.
And that is something we've definitely been thinking about when reflecting on how students get that equitable opportunity to participate. And, you know, a few of the hurdles that we've already solved is that we were thinking when students actually interact with that recording, how do they know that they are equally valued participants and equally valued members? And how do they get those options to engage in activities, particularly when they're set around group work? So just a small couple of things that we do at the beginning of those recordings is that we make sure that we recognise and welcome everyone who's joining live and those who are watching the recordings. And whenever we get to a group work activity, as soon as students in the live class have been put into breakout rooms, I then turn to what is just myself on the recording, but I know that it's going to a wider audience. I'll say, okay, so now students are in breakout groups. What we can do for those of you watching the recording is engage in it in this particular way. And so converting that group work option into that individualized activity But it is a really great point that you've made, and it's something that Stuart and I have identified, is how can we get that asynchronous engagement happening, and how can we also provide those opportunities for social connection, particularly for students who might be, you know, for health reasons or for personal circumstances reasons, having to take that option of the recording and maybe missing out on some of those really great social aspects at university. So how can we build those in and give that kind of really rich, rounded experience for them too?
Thank you. Our next question is from Lucy. Lucy would like to know, how do you handle providing the different modes of learning, face-to-face, online and intensive days, etc., with an already busy workload? Also, is this just done in your courses or have other faculties picked this up?
So from our feedback from students mainly, not just within our faculty, but it doesn't seem to be such a common approach. My previous institution, we used to do it mainly over the summer sessions, but for this, it's something that you know, we trialed a few years ago, and we've kind of been taking feedback, redoing it. So this is about the third now iteration of doing this course, and I think this year we've really taken, we've been proactive in gaining the students' voices to really make some major changes next year, because I feel that we've got some traction with this now, so we can move with it next year. As far as workload goes for teaching, what we've done as for workload is that for one intensive group that does the intensive on the first day of, or at the beginning of the trimester, and then one at the end of the trimester, it equates to the same number of hours that they would otherwise be getting in the 2-hour tutes throughout the trimester. So same sort of thing for accountability. A staff member, it would count as the equivalent to one tutorial. So, you know, by having a couple of tutes at each campus, so we've got our 2 main campuses, we run them, and there's one group on a Saturday, one group on a Sunday at each, so that's 4 tutorial groups, and that's what it equates to, 4 groups that you would otherwise just teach on a weekly basis, but it's just done over 8 days basically, so 2 days for each group, and the same, the online ones just count the same as if it was face-to-face. So the accountability is fairly straightforward as far as workload goes, whether you're a permanent academic, a sessional academic, or contracted academic, and it works that's quite easy in that sort of sense. Anything you want to add to that, Elizabeth?
I'd say in terms of workload, I know that there can be concerns around, as a teacher, switching between various modes. And I think one of the brilliant things that Stuart's done as a convener is almost give each of the tutors almost a specialisation in that area. So I teach the online classes, and obviously that becomes the recorded classes. So my mind can be solely on focusing, how do I give the richest experience for students engaging solely online? And for Stuart, you know, Stuart takes those intensive classes, so his mindset can be on, how do you make this manageable for students across the course of one day? So we get to bring these conversations together, but we each get that intensive look at our particular area. And I think for me personally as a tutor, that's been really helpful.
And I think, just, sorry, Elizabeth, in addition to that, I think by us specialising in one, we're looking at the sort of a more meso sort of course-wide UDL approach, and then thinking about how do we apply that within online teaching on a weekly basis, or face-to-face on a weekly basis, or intensive all day kind of things. Again, there's different approaches depending on whether it's a weekly or an all day intensive, whether it's online or face-to-face, and each of us focus on one aspect and look at applying it within that. And sort of as a team, we get together and sort of like, you know, debrief each time moving forward. So how we do each content, we can then adapt accordingly.
Thank you both. I think if we can have one more quick question, there are so many wonderful questions in here, but I'm going to ask our next one, which is from Helder. Helder says, the description of online classes has focused a lot on content delivery. Have you programmed online activities that develop skills, not just knowledge? If so, how did you make them more inclusive?
Elizabeth, I might hand that to you as you do the online shoots, if it's...
Of course. So we've had a lot of fun exploring things like creating those synchronous shared spaces, and things like a Word document shared online, or a different activity document shared online, can really make what would usually happen in that face-to-face classroom happen online. And I think one of the things we really noticed is that in having that online option, some of that skill development can actually happen for some students in ways that would happen in a more inclusive way than it would otherwise. So having that online document means that people who are using assistive technology can use that assistive technology with that online resource. Whereas if we had physical handouts in the classroom and didn't have that option available, there could be some barriers to their participation. So sometimes that skill development can be even better supported when we've got those digital means available. I think we've also seen that there are some students who might have high levels of social anxiety or who may not typically feel comfortable being able to put their hand up and respond in certain ways. And that online mode has allowed things like anonymous whiteboards to be put in place. So we could be running a Zoom class very much like we have today, and we might have some students who are using the chat and testing out their skill development through the chat, or testing it out anonymously on the whiteboard, or unmuting and giving their responses verbally. So that online world is really providing those multiple means and there's very different ways that people can engage.
Elizabeth, I am going to have to wrap you up there. Thank you to both of you, Stuart and Elizabeth, for a fantastic, engaging presentation. We do have more questions which we will send to you for some answers for us. And I would now invite everybody to head back to the lobby for your next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.